So first we're going to start with the very basics. We're going to learn how to make a budget spreadsheet, and we're going to start with parts of a spreadsheet.
Hey everyone, it's Justin again. Spreadsheets are a huge help in budgeting, and fun to play with, I'd say. But they can be a little confusing for beginners. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to identify important components of a spreadsheet program. Specifically, we'll be talking about cells, the name box, ranges, and the formula bar. I'll also show you where the formatting options are found so we can make your budget look nice and organized when it's all done. I'll be using Google Sheets for my budget. It's free, so you can use the same program. You just have to sign into a Google account. Use this waffle-looking button in the corner to open the app launcher, and then find this icon. Sheets isn't the only spreadsheet program out there, so if you use one of those, just be aware that they might look and act a little differently from Sheets. You can use their help menus or tutorials online if you need help. So let's jump into it. First, all spreadsheets are made up of a huge grid, and each of the blocks of the grid is called a cell. The cells are where most of your work will happen. You can type in them, change their colors, merge them into giant cells, and do a lot of other helpful things. But don't just treat a spreadsheet like an oversized table. Spreadsheet cells have a special power. They can automatically correct or format certain entries, like times, and even do automatic calculations for you. That last bit is why spreadsheets are so useful for budgeting. You can set it up to automatically calculate the complicated parts of your budget. And all you have to do is type in how much you make and spend. When talking about cells to others, it's necessary to know what cell we're talking about. For instance, which cell am I pointing at with my finger right now? Well, since you can't see me, you don't know, do you? It was this one, by the way. But how can I tell you that quickly without having to show you a picture every single time? Well, that's easy. I could just call it cell D9 because it's in column D and row 9. Now you try it. What's the name of this cell? Well, that's cell A11. When in depth, this right here is the name box. If you click on a cell, it will tell you the name of the cell. And if you type in a specific cell name, it will take you directly to that cell. You can use the name box to move around quickly in large spreadsheets. Oh, right. Did I mention that you're not restricted to just one cell at a time? You can click and drag across multiple rows or columns to select an entire range of cells. This range would be named C2 to G6, written as C2 colon G6, after the two cells in the upper left and lower right of the range. You can see that the name box even gives the name of this range, C2 to G6. And just like before, if we type a range into the name box, such as A5 to E12, it will highlight that range for you. You'll usually use this feature if you need to format or color multiple cells at once. When you're looking at a spreadsheet, it can be difficult to recognize which cells are just regular numbers and which are automatic calculations. That's what this bar is for, the formula bar. And it shows you what's actually in the cell. See, when you use an automatic calculation called a formula, we'll learn about those later, the cell will only show the result, not the formula you typed in. But by looking at the formula bar, you can see exactly what the formula is. And if you change the formula, it will automatically change the number shown in the cell. These are the components you'll need the most. But they're not the only components. For instance, any spreadsheet has a lot of toolbars and formatting options. We'll address these features when they're needed, or you can go try them out on your own. For instance, if you want to make your income and expenses different colors so they're easier to find, you can use this formatting option to change the color of a cell or a range. There are lots of other options to play around. Now that you know the basic components of spreadsheets, we can talk about how to actually use a spreadsheet. In your next lesson, you'll learn how formulas, and even their more complicated version, functions, can be used to make calculations a breeze. See that?
So we're going to progress directly to that.
Recently, and for no reason at all, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed.
Hey everyone, it's Justin again. In the last lesson, you learned all the different parts that make up a spreadsheet, which means now you can learn how to use one of the most important features of spreadsheets, formulas and functions. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to use formulas and functions to enhance your spreadsheet calculations. First, you'll learn about the symbols used to perform calculations with formulas, since they're a little different from calculators. Then you'll learn to link cells, so that if one number changes, all of the others will update automatically. Finally, you'll learn the difference between formulas and functions, why functions are way more useful. One of the biggest advantages to using a spreadsheet is that each cell can act as a calculator. These automatic calculations are called formulas. Before you type in the math, though, you have to remember to begin the cell with an equal sign. That tells the spreadsheet this cell should be equal to the result of this mathematical expression. Then, you can type in whatever expression you want, hit enter, and voila, it does the math for you. When typing expressions into a spreadsheet, you have to know what symbols to use. Adding and subtracting are easy. For addition, you just type in a plus, which is shift equals on most US keyboards. And subtraction is just a minus, which you use the hyphen key for. To multiply, though, you can't use an X. The spreadsheet will interpret that as text, or possibly the name of a cell. Instead, use the asterisk. On most keyboards, that's shift 8. For division, use a forward slash. That's the same key as the question mark, but you just don't press shift. Just imagine it like a fraction that's toppled over on its side, 8/3. If you need to type an exponent, use the caret key. That's shift 6. Whatever number comes after the caret is treated like an exponent. But what if you need multiple things in an exponent? Then you have to group everything together with parentheses, using shift 9 and shift 0. Using these tips, you'll be able to use spreadsheets like giant calculators. But that's not even the best part. By linking to cells, you can create automatically updating formulas. Say I need the value in A2 to always be double the value in A1, and for A3 to be 3 times as much. Anytime I change A1, I would have to manually change the others. That means I'm having to change 3 cells instead of just 1. And on a big spreadsheet, like a budget spreadsheet, changing 1 cell means that you have to go searching for all the other cells that have to change. But there's an easier way. Linking cells inside formulas. It's really easy to do. Just type a formula showing the relationship, but use the cell's name instead of its value. Notice how the spreadsheet has A1 highlighted, both the cell and the name in the same color? That's how you know the linking worked. Now, this cell will always be calculated as A1 times 2. And now this cell will always be A1 times 3. Now, anytime I change A1, A2 and A3 will change automatically. Linking and formulas will be necessary for a working budget. If your income or one of your bills change, you just have to edit that one number and let the formulas do the rest of the work. But you know what's better than formulas? functions. A function is basically a long, pre-coded formula that you don't even have to type out. Here's an exaggerated example. If you needed to calculate a standard deviation, and you'll learn what that is when you take statistics, this is the formula you'd have to write out. Hold on, get a little bit more room. There we go. That is the formula for standard deviation. Do you want to type all that out? I sure don't. But luckily, we don't have to, because we can use a function instead of a formula. Make sure to use the equal sign, then type the function command, std. We have to tell it what cells to use, so we use an open parentheses, name the range of the cells. Notice how now it highlights the range from A1 to A6, and close the parentheses. And just like that, it knows to calculate the standard deviation without us having to type that long formula. And that, my friend, is the magic of functions. Even though budgets don't usually require a standard deviation, there will be plenty of opportunities to use functions. For instance, if you need to add up your income and expenses to find what's left over. And trust me, adults have a lot of expenses. You could just type in a formula that adds up all these cells. That would take a while to type out. Instead, we can use the sum function. It does the same thing, sums of all the values in that range, but it's much shorter. And there's an added benefit as well. If you realize you forgot one of your expenses, like HOA fees, and had to insert an extra row, the function automatically knows to readjust the range. See how now it ends at C6 rather than C5? A formula where you linked the individual cells wouldn't know to do that. Use functions whenever possible to save yourself a lot of headache. There are a lot of functions you can use in Google Sheets. If you'd like a list of them, you can look under the Insert menu where it says Function. But you won't understand a whole lot of what you're looking at. Most of these functions are used by professional accountants and data analysts. In the next lesson, I'll introduce you to a few functions that are actually useful to a regular person just trying to build a good budget. See you then.
Any questions before we move on to that section? Then let's learn some useful functions.
1, 2, 3, go! That's the best of it. Happy Friday!
Hey everyone, it's Justin again. In the last lesson, you learned how to do automatic calculations in spreadsheets using formulas and functions. But it's hard to use functions if you don't actually know it. This lesson will teach you about the most useful functions for building a working budget. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to appropriately use spreadsheet functions to perform automatic calculations. This will include the sum if, the product, average, and days functions. You learned your first function in the previous lesson, the sum function. If you type equals sum, parentheses, and link specific cells or a range of cells inside the parentheses, it will automatically add up the values in all the cells you selected, even if the numbers inside them change. There's also a more specific version of sum called SUMIF. SUMIF can be used to add up certain values while ignoring others. Like if you keep track of all of your expenses and want to know how much you spend just on food. The downside to SUMIF is that it requires a lot more setup. You have to choose what range to check for the selection criterion, decide what criterion to check for, and select the range to add up. In this case, we've chosen to base the criteria on the category column between B2 and B11. We only want to add the values that are categorized as food and the values to actually add together are in the cost column. This function adds up all the costs we've categorized as food and nothing else. To add up all the entertainment costs, we use the same function, just change the criterion to entertainment. SumIf is good for sums where you don't feel like searching for specific cells. Let the spreadsheet do the searching for you. If you need to quickly multiply values, you can use the product function. Say we wanted to take your monthly student loan repayment and find out how much you pay every year. We would use the product function to multiply your monthly payment times 12 months per year. And then, if you wanted to know the total amount you'll spend repaying your student loans, we'd calculate a product again, this time between the yearly cost and the number of years. Notice that you still have to know which cells or numbers to use. Spreadsheet can't just read your mind. There's also a function to average a bunch of values. If you wanted to know the average amount you spent on groceries for the first half of the year, you would type equals average, then parentheses with the range of values you want to average linked inside. This is especially useful for costs that fluctuate from month to month, because it gives you a good estimate of how much you should budget for. If you budgeted $212 for groceries, some months you go a little over, and some months you go a little under. But over time they even out, and you'll have budgeted almost exactly what you needed. This last one is optional, but especially if you expect to be on a tight budget, you'll want to know about the days function. Days automatically counts how many days there are between two dates, such as the day you get paid and the day a bill is due. Setting it up is pretty easy. Choose an end date for the calculation, then the start date. It sounds weird to put the end date before the start date, but it's important to remember. If my rent is due on...
It's important to remember because they're essentially performing a subtraction function, so that you want the end date first because you're subtracting the start date from it.
The 1st. If I get paid on the 31st, the days function tells me that I'll have to go 30 days from when that money leaves my account the next time I get paid. I can continue doing this for each of my bills. The days function is great for keeping an eye on how long you'll be short on money, so you can plan your bills and withdrawals to make sure you don't accidentally go over your budget. You may have already noticed, but throughout this video I've been showing you different ways a budget can be set up. You can list all your bills and see what spending money you have left over. You might want to keep track of all your expenses to see where you could cut costs and save money. You can plan for the long term by taking your monthly payments and see how much they'll cost you over the years. You may choose to use past bills in order to estimate what your future bills will cost. Or you can be super specific and plan your budget by the day, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck. These are all perfectly valid ways of budgeting, and it's up to you to decide which way works best for you. In the next few videos, you'll learn about the difference between fixed and variable expenses. And then we'll look at a few budgeting styles that many financial planners swear by, the 50-30-20 rule and envelope budgeting. See you then.
Any questions? That concludes the youth section. We will move on to adult.